Good morning and half a day. My name is Catherine Castro, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our first virtual general membership meeting. We are excited to see you, and I'm so glad that you have been able to join us today. And we're looking forward to introducing you to our next meeting. That is going to be a hybrid event, so we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But we do have some housekeeping notes before we get started. All our participants on today's session are on mute. You have an opportunity before the webinar started to send questions to Rebecca. If you have new questions, please feel free to send them via the question feature located at the right corner of your screen. The Chamber team will pass these messages to our panelists during the Q&A portion of this program. I'm happy to introduce you to our guest today. Our guest speaker earned his JD from Georgetown University Law Center, received a master's degree from Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and a bachelor's degree in philosophy from the University of Arkansas. As an undergraduate, he was elected Phi Beta Kappa and awarded the prestigious Harry S. Truman Scholarship in recognition of his dedication to a career in public service. Prior to his return to Guam, our guest speaker resided in the Washington, D.C. area for 11 years and served as managing director for the Federal City Council, a nonprofit civic organization comprised of over 200 key 200 key business and community leaders. He was responsible for developing and managing the organization's major projects, including transportation, economic development, and public education reform partnerships. He worked collaboratively with federal and local government officials, chief executive officers, and other senior business leaders and issue experts in the DC area to advance the work of the council. He also spent time in the public sector, serving in the administration of DC Mayor Anthony A. Williams, first as an economic development analyst and then as a policy director. As policy director, Mr. Fernandez was the mayor's point person on legislative policy issues and also the primary liaison to members of the local legislature. Prior to working with the District of Columbia government, John served as a senior analyst in the Strategic Consulting Division of C.B. Richard Ellis Torto Wheaton Research, located in Boston, Massachusetts. As superintendent for the Guam Department of Education, our speaker leads the island's public school system, which is comprised of 41 schools, approximately 31,000 school children, and 4,000 employees. Members, we are pleased to welcome our guest speaker, Mr. John Fernandez, who will be joined by members of his team, Joe Sanchez, Deputy Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, and Erika Cruz, Deputy Superintendent of Assessment and Accountability. So let's get started. Welcome. So glad that you're able to join us today.
Right, thank you, and good morning, Kathy. Thank you for welcoming our team. You know, I know that you've probably read, all of you have probably read the paper or seen on the evening news, a lot of discussion about the Guam Department of Education and the discussion about reopening schools and all of the things that we were going through to reach out to stakeholders to get input as we start to plot out where we're headed in this coming school year. And of course, just by having this virtual meeting, we can all recognize that we're in a completely new situation than we were several months ago. In fact, months ago when I was at the chamber, I appreciated the opportunity to touch base in person with the leadership and the members at the membership meeting to talk about issues, but also on the side to talk about ways to move forward. And it's a lot different when you're doing it virtually. And I was telling Kathy earlier, the other thing is there's no lunch today, so maybe we'll get back to that in a few months when we're all back to normal. But in all seriousness, I do want to say that when we look at the island's recovery, and this of course has been a subject of discussion ever since we went into a government shutdown, and recognizing the impact on our economy, particularly the hospitality sector, we've since April, we've been engaging in our own work to look at the reopening of schools, because we know that these reopening discussions actually go hand in hand. We know that we're not going to be able to fully reopen the economy without reopening the public schools, and especially with many of your employees who are also our parents and so forth. So we thought that, as we got, we're now in PCOR 3, that we ought to make sure that we take some time to explain, even though you might have read portions of it in the news, to explain our thinking, to clarify what our plan is, and then to talk a little bit about the impact that we know it's going to have on families and employers, and then take questions and get input from the members of the chamber to better inform and help us plan even further as we move along. So so that's the purpose of the conversation. So thank you for accommodating the request to address your members. Back in April, like I said, we shut down in March, and immediately that first night we were on Zoom, planning for how we were going to get through the week, and then get through the end of the school year, and then turn our attention to the next school year. So we were doing exactly what we're doing today, trying to figure out how to operate in a very uncertain environment. And as you know, it came to a point where we were just extending the public health emergency, and we had to determine whether or not it was viable and realistic to return 30,000 students back to our public schools in the middle of a pandemic that we were grappling with globally, and especially here on island, with a lot of decisions that needed to be made. So we closed the school system down, and as you know, we went through the closure of our school facilities. We wrapped up the school year. We had to deal with distance learning, switching to distance learning right away to get through the final quarter. And then you've heard the grab and go meals, the grad and go graduations, just to get to close out the school year. But in April, we also began to refocus ourselves as well on what we knew would be the major challenge, getting into the start of school year 2020 to 2021. Luckily the pandemic hit at the end of last school year, so it was really a matter of tying up the loose ends and making the best of the situation. But we know that's not acceptable in the coming school year. We have to do better to ensure that we're able to keep our kids safe, keep our employees safe. We want to advance our mission of teaching and learning, and we also want to make sure that we're able to measure the progress and the quality of education throughout the course of the year. But again, albeit in a completely different environment. As we've gone along the way, people have said to me personally, you guys are under so much pressure. And I think that's true in one sense, but in another sense, nobody's ever done this before. Nobody on Guam, in the States, it's a completely similar situation in many school districts, many states that we're watching and monitoring and speaking with. So, in that sense, there's not a lot of pressure, but it is important that what we do is mapped out thoughtfully, deliberately, and with input from as many people as we can, so that we can inform our community, especially our parents and students, as to what to expect. We put together a district school readiness task force in April. Deputy Superintendent Joe Sanchez is actually chairing that committee, and it is comprised of 6 subcommittees focused on safety. I know Erika Cruz is having a hard time logging on, but Erika actually is chair of our operations and safety committee. We have Joe is actually the lead on the distance learning piece. We have the third component of our plan has to do with mental health and socio-emotional well-being. And then we have 3 other subcommittees focused on kind of internal issues relative to the budget, relative to our personnel management, dealing with employees and employee situations. And then the last piece really about communication, how we're going to make sure that we're in constant dialogue and outreach to everybody in the community who's going to be impacted by our plan. We put a lot of effort into this, weekly, daily Zoom calls, teachers, administrators, staff, board members, parents, students, throughout, to come up with a set of recommendations and an approach to the school year that we went to the board with, our Guam Education Board with at the end of June, on June 30th, to get their affirmation and approval to move forward. And so now we're in the stage of getting down into the details of the logistics, the school level planning, and then really pushing out as much information and communication as we can. I would just say the three major pillars of our strategy is number one, safe operations. Safety is driving all of our decisions as we come to the reopening of our school system. Number two is because of the safety considerations, including the social or physical distancing, distance learning becomes an important option and strategy to be able to address teaching and learning in this environment. And then the third piece was, again, like I mentioned, the socio-emotional well-being of our employees and our students, knowing that we've come through several months of, shutdown, of social isolation, of kids being away from schools where they would normally get a number of supports, including food, including, our school nurses, our school counselors, and so forth. We know they've been without that, at the end of the school year and over the summer. So that's a third major piece, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. Right now, the scheduled opening date, the official opening date is August 11th, but we are in discussions to push it back to August 17th is the discussion right now, to give us some time early on to do a lot of work with the teachers and staff who will be returning to basically address these issues that we've talked about, the new protocols, give them some training around the distance learning options, and really ensure that they're ready for students to come back to school for those who want to. And then before we get the detailed presentation, let me just clarify that this is not the new plan for the entire school year or for years to come. This is really looking at what we would call the first phase of reopening. As public health conditions change, as the safety parameters, get altered or modified, if things improve, we are definitely wanting to be in a position where we can adapt and respond to those improvements in the public health situation and get back to a situation where we can have more kids getting that face-to-face instruction. That's definitely our goal, to be able to safely have our kids, all of our kids, back in school if possible. At this stage, it's not possible. And so what you see here is basically what we would call, phase one of our reopening strategy. And as things change, we're going to look to be adaptable, flexible, and innovative in how we respond. And again, it's not easy to turn a ship like the Department of Education, but once we start to think about the contingencies out there, we're already planning for what happens if things get better, what happens if things get worse. A lot of that is still being discussed and thought through by our team. So today I'll have Deputy Superintendent Sanchez kind of give an overview of those of the plan, and then we'd be happy to take any questions, any suggestions, and so forth from the members. So with that, Kathy, if you're ready, I'm happy to turn this over to Deputy Superintendent Sanchez.
Super, thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen and make sure I do this correctly. Thanks. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you our reopening plan. As the superintendent noted, this was something developed over the entire pandemic. I mean, we started discussing closure of the schools. We discussed summer school and as well as potentially the reopening when school begins with literally hundreds of teachers. I mean, they were able to join us really the week after. We were able to get teachers involved, administrators, student representatives, as well as parents. Let me see if it's not switching. So what to expect for next school year? So I'm glad that Mr. Fernandez noted that really what drives a lot of our decisions and all of our our plans is really student safety. That had to be the primary focus, and we also had to accept, a couple of things in terms of our principles. We accepted that, this pandemic is real. We expected that the virus is serious. It is contagious, and the fact that we don't want students and parents and of course their families to get sick. So with that kind of as our general understanding, we looked at decreased school capacity and physical distancing. We followed the CDC guidelines. We looked at temperature checks and visual symptom screening, the use of face mask or cloth coverings, hygiene and cleaning protocols, and social and emotional. I need to correct that that thing that was just added today. Social and emotional supports. The first part is a section that deals with, it overlaps with two committees. It overlaps with distance learning and overlaps with operations. But it is really important that we begin with this so that folks understand two things. First is that this was really in response to concerns that were brought up by parents and students. I mean, the questions were, or the comments were, I'm not ready to send my child to school, or I don't think it's the right time for them to physically attend school on campus. And many of them have stated that no matter what kind of safety protocols you put in place, I don't care how often you clean the place, I don't care how often they wash their hands, I still don't want my child to come to school. So to address those concerns, we've created the home learning models. And the initial home learning model was simply the fully online, where the students have access to the internet and access to equipment kind of on a regular basis. So that generally would allow them to engage in 100% online program. Now, during the discussions with parents regarding the home learning full online effort, there were a good number of parents who have said, I don't want to send my children to school either. I don't want them to physically attend. So I want them to have some type of home learning program, but we don't have the equipment. Are you able to, one, provide the equipment? Which the answer is no. At this time, we're not able to provide the equipment for them. But if you can't provide the equipment, is there some other accommodation that you can make? And we decided that yes, we can actually put together a hard copy version of our entire curriculum, which you could take home, and then there would be some kind of process that would be you collecting the work kind of on a regular basis and delivering the work back to school for grading. And then with the traditional model, we also knew that we would not be able to accommodate 100% capacity with all of our schools. So we decided to, look at a couple of numbers or look at the numbers and see whether or not 100% was feasible, which we decided from the very beginning that it wasn't. Then we looked at 50%. We looked at all the way down to 25%, which is basically 1/4. And we ultimately came up with 1/3. One third of the population would be safe enough that we could operate using physical distancing as a principle. So the reason why we kind of emphasize that the models of learning are really in response to safety is because in a normal situation, in a perfect world, these three models, we believe, really shouldn't be separate. In fact, they should all be part of a comprehensive curricular program for all students. Our desire is to not live forever in a world where everything is home learning or everything is online. We believe that there needs to be a substantial amount of face-to-face interaction. So again, like I noted, a perfect world, these three models would not be separate. We would have face-to-face interaction, and online instruction should be a normal part of regular face-to-face interaction, as well as extending that learning to home. And the home learning hard copy model really is just another way to look at homework. I mean, this is something that's traditionally done, through the years. So really, all three of these should be something that we look at on a regular basis to complement one another. Unfortunately, the current situation that we have forces us to separate them. With a decreased capacity, we're looking at 1/3, where we have students in a 3 groups. This is for the traditional schedule. So here you have an example, sample population of 1,200 students, breaking them up by last name, and you're looking at, pretty much 400 per group. Now, the purpose of the last name was really trying our best to see if we can put family members together, siblings across all 3 levels, so elementary, middle, and high, where we can get the siblings into the same group. Our current system doesn't track siblings. I mean, we track obviously demographics, but there's no indicator on the demographic that tells you whether or not they're a brother or sister of somebody else. We've told parents that if they have, because we understand that, there's some siblings who don't have the same last name, or there may be family members who live in the same household who don't have the same last names. All the parents need to do is simply call the school and let them know, hey, these are my kids, or these are the children that live in our home, and we would like for all of them to be in the same group. And they would just, if they're at different levels, elementary, middle, and high, they would just need to call the school and tell them what group they would like their kids to be in, and then the school should be able to accommodate and make sure that they're all in the same group. The ABC schedule seemed to work out the best operationally. Part of that has to do with the fact that when you have the ABC schedule, when the school puts together what is called their master schedule, they're able to schedule all of their teachers, they are able to schedule all of their students kind of in the same way, and it doesn't affect the master schedule. All they do is schedule them the same way that they would do every year, and then divide them up into the 3 groups. And if later on we are able to find out that we can collapse the groups, meaning we don't have to necessarily do 3 groups, I do want to point that out. With the data that we're getting back from our parents in the model of learning, there are a larger number of individuals who are selecting the online version and selecting the home group, the home learning hard copy, which in some cases is over 50%. So there are some schools that are already over 50% who are doing home learning, which what would do is that would bring down the total percentage of students who are in the traditional group, which again brings back the possibility of, since the capacity has already been brought down, do we want to revisit the 3 groupings, and do we want to kind of collapse them to maybe 2 groupings, since we're able to accommodate more students. With the schedule that we have here, it's a lot easier to do that, because all you would do is take ABC and then collapse it into an AB, if the data allows for us to do so. We've decided to kind of start off with the ABC as planned, because we are concerned with, we have the number one question that has been coming up from parents is, can we switch models? And the answer is yes. And of course, the reason why the answer has to be yes is because the whole point of the models to begin with is, it's really an accommodation to the parents, and it's accommodations to address their concerns or their fears for sending their children to school. So because of that, obviously if home conditions change, or the parents are a little bit more comfortable with sending their kids to school, or sometimes it's the students themselves. So students themselves might be fearful of going to school, and maybe over time they get over that fear and they're willing to come to school. So in any of those situations, we are ready to just have the parent call the school, let the school know that they would like to change models, and they would do so. The only thing is that we asked for them to really consider changing during the end of a grading period. So just like a regular class, we don't recommend students change teachers in the middle of a quarter or in the middle of a semester, because it takes time for the teacher to get to know the student. The teacher has already given a certain number of assignments, which means there's already a certain percentage of grades that have been earned. So switching from teacher to teacher is very difficult in the middle of a quarter or a grading period, just like it would be switching models. So, the only thing that we ask parents to do is, yes, you can switch models, but we ask that you consider changing it during a grading period rather than just kind of in the middle of the quarter. Now, because we know that changing is an option, we want to make sure that we are able to plan for the school year and accommodate all of the different selections. So we are starting with the ABC, the traditional, I mean the three groupings, and we want to be consistent because we want to make sure that students are taught the social distancing requirements, as well as to potentially accommodate any changes that might happen during the first few weeks of school. So we're monitoring that data very closely with regards to the selections from parents. On campus access, operationally, we've had schools kind of do their own walkthrough. So all the principals and their staff were instructed to do a walkthrough of their entire campus, take into account social distancing requirements, taking into account foot traffic, entry points and so on. So we have controlled entry points at every school, visitor protocols for every campus that are going to be published, and temperature and symptom screening, on a regular basis for visitors and students as well. Here we have our temperature checks will be conducted by school staff as students enter the campus. This is off the bus. And we have our criteria. Students will be required to utilize face covering, face mask and coverings. These are all the approved styles. We are ordering and we will provide the disposable ones. That's the one on the top left for students, as well as the smaller ones for the younger students. But of course, if they choose to use their own style, they would have to conform with one of the others. Here we have decreased building capacity, as I noted earlier, through the groupings, the learning models, as well as the attendance groups. We also have our regular hygiene practices identified for students. This is throughout the day and throughout the classroom. Limited use and shared items, cleaning standards, disinfect instructional devices, disinfecting common areas, student desks, restrooms, cafeteria tables, and using the products that are approved by CDC, hand sanitizer, alcohol sprays, and so on. These are some of the products that are also supplemental that, if individuals want to add on top of what we are providing. So we are providing the cleaning supplies and the cleaning materials to all of our staff. And if this is the additional items, then they may use those additional items as well. Now, I wanted to just kind of go into a few points regarding the home learning models. There are going to be a set of expectations across the board between all of the different models. So there really wouldn't be a difference in curriculum. I know that that's one of the questions. Will there be a totally different curriculum for each one? So the curriculum and content will not be different for each of the subject areas. We have a very structured system right now in place. We call it the professional learning communities model. And that is a model that promotes collaboration at every grade level with every content area, that's every course that's taught in the district. So teachers who teach the same courses are brought together on a regular basis and clarify what are called the priority standard skills and topics. The priority standard skills and topics are basically those topics or pieces of content that are going to be consistent across the board for each course. So a biology teacher who is teaching biology knows exactly what content is going to be included for that particular class. Sixth grade math teacher, same thing. All the sixth grade math teachers know the exact content that's covered for that year, and so on for every grade level, for every course. That process is what is going to be governing the content across the board. Here is where you see there's going to be separate examples of how each of those models will work and their particular pieces. So for example, the home learning online piece, obviously the parents will need to have equipment and internet access. With that, we know that a lot of time is going to have to be spent with the students and the parents on how to utilize the tools for that classroom, the technology tools. You know, do they use all the apps? Our primary learning management system is going to be Google Classroom. We are a Google school system, which means we use all the Google Suite items that are available to us, the email, the chat features, the Google Meets, and of course the calendar. So making sure that all students and their families know how to use all of those applications for the purpose of that course is really going to be the first couple of days and weeks for each class. When we talk about video conferencing schedule, we're looking at a minimum of 1 per class per week and a maximum of 3 per class, per week. And I know that this was brought up this was brought up during one of our parent sessions, and I just wanted to clarify something because there was a parent who said, once a week, that's not enough time. And we just want to be clear that we're talking about the video conferencing component, where they're meeting with their teacher and they have a synchronous opportunity to interact with them. For those of you who may not be familiar with this terminology when it comes to online courses, there's models that include synchronous instruction and asynchronous instruction. Synchronous instruction is when all of the students of the class log on at the same time. The teacher is there, the teacher facilitates the meeting, very similar to like what we're doing now, or very similar to a Zoom meeting or a GoToMeeting meeting where the participants are together at the same time. Asynchronous is when the information is presented separately. Sometimes it's through a video, sometimes it's through written material or chat groups, and the teachers and students can respond and log on at different times. So it's asynchronous in terms of their interaction. We are doing a combination of both, where they're able to come on at the same time during certain times of the week, and then the rest will be done separately and independently. And I know the immediate criticism that we got to, well, that's not enough. I mean, shouldn't they be in class every day? They will be in class every day, but anybody who's attended a online virtual meeting, or anybody who's attended a webinar would know that these webinars are exhausting. The idea is not to try to mimic in-school traditional instruction and then just put it online. So we're not just broadcasting the class and expecting a student to sit there from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock. That would be too exhausting, and we know already that would not be effective. There has to be some combination of synchronous as well as independent asynchronous opportunities for the students to interact with the work. Also, we have to keep in mind that in elementary school, we're talking about 6 classes. So it's not like they only have one video conference the entire week. This is per class per week. So that's, we have language arts, reading, math, science, and social studies, and tomorrow as the primary courses in elementary school. So that's a minimum of 1 video conference the entire week for each one of those courses. In middle school, that's 7 classes. So if you're just going to do the minimum of one video conference, that's already 7 video conferences throughout the entire week. And in high school, it's 6. If you do the maximum, you just multiply by 2. You just multiply by 3, which is a lot. I mean, some of us, in our regular work, we attend 3, 4, 5. My record for a Zoom meeting is I've had 6 Zoom meetings in one day, and even at that, that's pretty exhausting. So imagine if we had to translate that for every student, as well as their parents that they're supposed to assist. So we're very conscious about the online time that students are going to be required to have, and making sure that there's a communication between the teacher and the parents so that they know that there is synchronous opportunities where there will be video conferences and there will be somewhat lectures and actual lessons where the students can actually log on at the same time. But then a lot of that time would also need to be independent work, which the teacher would also support them with. Home learning would be very similar. The biggest difference is a lot of the material would really just be independent material. So you're looking at a lot of independent work for home learning. So there's an error here on the third column. So this part right here should be home learning hard copy. But when they pick up the hard copy material, that will basically guide them through the week's lesson. Our teachers are working really hard to make sure that the material is easily understood by all parents and all different experience levels and so on. Sometimes it might not be the parent who's helping the child. Sometimes it's an older brother or sister. So we want to make sure that the material that's provided can stand alone, and it's something that the students are able to do independent work when they are at home. And the traditional face-to-face model here, we've tried to put together what we consider to be a pattern, or a routine for the students on a regular basis for all classes, where you have on day one, you have intro to the content, the material. So if you're a student who's in the A group and you start on a Monday, day one is basically, introduction to the content, basic presentation. The teacher will kind of go through the assignments that are going to be expected for the next 2 days. And in day 2 and 3, although it's an off day, we want students to know that it's not necessarily a day off. So it's not like a holiday for you. There needs to be some routine set up where you're working on those 2 days. So it needs to be a home type of assignment, where the recommendation that we have here is you begin the review of the work from the previous day, you have your assignments, or if you have to practice a skill like in mathematics, you would start your practice on that day, and you would do so for each of the courses that you have. And then on day 3, you would kind of try to complete your assignment or continue your practice or do the work that was assigned to you in day 1. And one of our teachers actually brought up, said, that's kind of like what we try to do when we talk to students about homework on the weekends, where you give homework on Fridays, right? And you say, here's what we're covering on Friday, on Saturday, try to do some of the assignments or at least start your work. And then on Sunday, you would actually complete your assignment and have it prepared to turn on the next day. Now, we know that this is easier said than done, but at the very least, trying to make sure that there's a routine with the students and at home will increase the likelihood of having that material retained before they return to school on their assigned day. This is an example of how we're really trying to work hard to make sure that the material that is sent home, this is both the online version as well as the hard copy version, that it's really easy for families and parents to understand. That was one of the criticisms that we heard over the last, not just from DOE, but in kind of all the schools that tried to do online instruction. And this, of course, as Mr. Fernandez noted, is not just Guam. So we've really compiled a lot of best practices out there. And one of the concerns was parents needed more guidance on how to structure their lessons and how they had to structure their supports for their kids while they're at home. So we've really simplified what the lesson plan looked like. I think one of the challenges that we had in the beginning is when we shared lesson plans with parents, is they were written for teachers. So, unless you're a teacher or someone who's familiar with educational jargon, sometimes they're not very easy to understand, or they're not really organized in a flowing way for most people. So, we've asked our teachers to really write the lesson plans in a way that is easy to understand for parents or families, and with step-by-step instructions that they could follow. So that's where we have with part 1, part 2, explanation of the materials and content, and then part 3 is actually walking them through all of the different activities. And this is my last slide, and I just wanted to kind of point out how we really are going to be spending a lot of time in the beginning of the first couple of weeks building relationships with our parents and students, making sure that they understand the purpose of everything that we're doing, making sure they understand the model that they've selected, distributing the syllabus, because we realize that for a lot of students, it's going to be like the parents are going to be going to school with the kids also, like that's the level of support that might be needed. So it's almost as though they're returning to school as well. So we're distributing the syllabus, identifying the protocols, expectations, answering any questions, and then talking about the safety expectations as well as the social and emotional supports. We're taking that last part especially serious because we know that under such traumatic circumstances, in the community, whether it be health-wise, whether it be economic, we know that a lot of our families are struggling because they were either furloughed or laid off or just not having any steady income right now. That creates such an enormous amount of stress on their families. So we don't want to just jump into the academics all of a sudden without really spending time to get to know them and be able to provide the supports that are necessary for them, for the children to be successful. The second phase is that are supposed to be moving into the curriculum, introduction of content and material, and review of protocols and expectations for class. So it doesn't mean that phase 1 has to be complete, but we can start moving into phase 2, where we know that that's kind of the second stage. Emphasis is actually moving into the curriculum content. And we also know that these phases will be fluid with our teachers, because as we go back into the curriculum, there may be times where we need to provide additional supports, whether it be social and emotional or academic supports to the families. So we know that there's going to be fluid movement back and forth. And then this third phase is trying to instill an attitude of ongoing improvement with all of our staff, whether it be the staff, faculty, or even our administrators. I mean, we do this on a regular basis from an organizational standpoint, but because we know that this is such a dynamic situation, and not just dynamic within the school system, but dynamic in terms of the community and society itself, that we have to make sure that we have a regular process in place to communicate best practices, identify challenges, address those challenges systematically, and what we consider to be very important, share those strategies across the district. So we have a very consistent model of communication as well as collaboration across the district, not just with teachers, but with school administrators. So when best practices or challenges are addressed at a particular school level, we're able to share those best practices with all of our different schools, kind of on an immediate basis. So we hope to continue on with that as we progressively implement the different models. So that actually concludes my slideshow. And maybe if we're, I guess, are we moving into questions?
Hi, yes, we have some questions on the chat box. So if you take a look at what those questions are, you're welcome to go ahead and get started.
Let's see. Sorry, I'm just trying to.
So the first question.
Yeah,
I'll facilitate the question. So the first question is, sure. Will there be a regular disinfection schedule for schools and buses, and who will do the disinfection?
Yeah, Erika, go ahead with the operational.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay. Yeah. I thought you couldn't hear me. Okay, so regarding regular disinfection, we were required by public health to submit a school reentry plan. And on that school reentry plan, we have, the schools have developed a regular disinfection. So anything that's high traffic area should be cleaned frequently. We will be providing spray bottles with solution to the school administrators as well as the school, the classroom teachers, so that they'll be able to wipe down the student desk and doorknobs and such. But we also have our custodial services who will be able to assist us in wiping down high traffic areas such as, you know, the restrooms, doorknobs, counters, and so forth. Relative to buses, we met with a Department of Public Works, and they will be wiping down the seats after each bus run. So when the students are dropped off at the school site, the bus drivers will wipe down the seats before they pick up their next group of students.
If we could on the buses, I mean, we're still in discussion for some of the details with Public Works. But again, they are, based on the guidelines that were received from the physicians group, they are going to be implementing physical distancing as well as requirements for face coverings. So in addition to the disinfection of the buses, they will be implementing those measures. We'll get the exact details regarding how many students they actually expect to be able to ride on, you know, on a bus. And that'll help us with the planning for the transportation by next week. We'll get that by next week, but they definitely are putting in place safety parameters on the buses.
The second question, sir, is there a RFP for disinfection, and if so, when would that be awarded?
So I think what, you know, as Erika said, the custodial vendors that we currently have in place will play a large part in addressing the disinfection of classrooms and so forth as a regular part of their cleaning. Although we are looking at the increased frequencies, we also are, and Erika, you might have details on this. We also are hoping to purchase the cleaning supplies for the schools. Right now, our priority is around, I know this is going to come up later, the PPEs regarding the face masks, the hand sanitizers, plexiglass dividers, and there's something else, and the cleaning supplies. So those we will be, we actually are trying to tackle that through a number of procurement channels. Most immediately, we are looking at putting out a small purchase procurement for those priority supplies. We also have an indefinite quantity bid that has been published already and is currently in process. I believe the deadline for responses to that indefinite quantity bid is going to be the 29th of July. And then we also have the opportunity to ride on some federal contracts that we're still exploring. We're not sure if those will come through, but we're working with FEMA and potentially GSA to also develop a supply channel that way. So we're looking at local and federal opportunities, and really we're trying to build a year's worth of supply to make it through the school year. We are not going to be opening if we don't have the PPEs and the supplies in place. And right now, we definitely acknowledge that we're in a situation where we're competing, you know, globally for those supplies. But we do believe that within the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to determine whether we'll have the necessary PPEs and cleaning supplies to be able to open on our planned schedule.
The third question, what protocols is GDOE putting into place if a child is determined to be positive, and how will that affect the grouping schedule? Potentially an entire group could be affected. And so we have been collaborating with public health. Our school health nurse counselor administrator, Julieta Kaneni, has been working very closely with public health with our protocols. And this protocol is much like the protocol in any type of infectious disease, such as TB, measles, mumps, and so forth. Public health typically takes the lead in doing contact tracing and working with the school administrators to get certain, you know, students and adults tested if there would be a contact, if there could be a employee or even a student who has tested positive for COVID-19. So in a nutshell, public health takes the lead. We provide the necessary support, such as contact tracing and the names of the students and contact numbers, so that we can provide that listing to public health. So as far as notifying parents and students, this is not new to us. We have we have a few cases of positive active TB on some of our students or even our employees. So we have a great communication with public health to do the required contact tracing to ensure that the individuals who may be potentially affected or infected will be contacted. What we're also trying to do is minimize the movement, especially in the elementary level, where contact tracing would be much easier when students are in just one classroom. Obviously, in the secondary level will be a little more different because you have middle schools having 7 classes and high schools having 6. And so it would be difficult to keep students in one classroom. They would have to go from subject to subject versus elementary level where they can stay in the classroom. Many of our administrators are potentially exploring the idea of having the lower grade levels, the kindergarteners and the first graders, eating in the classroom so that they minimize contact with other students.
So if I
wanted to add more?
Yeah, let me interject here. So just to give you a good picture of where we are with the number of students we anticipate to be at a school on a particular day. I know you saw a slide that said, oh, if we had a school of 1,200 and if you divided them into 3, that would be cohorts of 400 on any given day. But that's assuming that all 1,200 students are opting for a face-to-face option and an alternating schedule. What we're seeing is we're definitely working to accommodate the parents and students in being able to select and get their preference amongst the 3 different options. So we put the option out for online home learning, hard copy home learning, and then the face-to-face with an alternating schedule. At the middle school and high school level, we have about 70% of our respondents so far. And this is, I think we're almost at maybe 70% of responses already collected. So it looks like 70% of those respondents in middle school and high school are opting to stay home to do either online or hard copy lessons. And that means that there's only 30% of the students opting for traditional face-to-face with an alternating schedule. And once you break that 30% into 3 different cohorts, at a high school like, for instance, JFK, which normally has about 1,800 to 1,900 students, that looks like 150 students on a daily basis at JFK. So instead of the 1,900, you're talking about 150 students and keeping those students, operating within those safety parameters. So, I think at the elementary level, it's about a 60% portion who want to stay home and either online or hard copy, and then it's 40%, a little bit higher, 40% who are opting to come to school. But for I think for a school such as UP Elementary, which has about 700 students, we're looking at maybe 50 to 60 students so far who would be at school on any given day. So it really is a dramatic reduction in the, at least so far, based on the information we have, and we're updating it weekly, a substantial reduction in actually the number of students who actually want to physically come back to school. So that'll help us, I think, on the safety side, on being able to handle the frequent disinfections and control the movement of students at the campus. Obviously, we'd love to see, we get in a situation where more of them are able and willing to come back, but that's where we are today. I think the other point to make is that following a public health guidance, that'll determine whether we actually have to close a facility or part of a facility based on the situation, the information about that student or employee and the contact tracing. So the contingency plan in that situation would be to switch, if we have to close for a period of time, would be to switch from the traditional face-to-face to do 100% distance learning for the period of time during which that facility is closed. So that would be that's the contingency plan in that situation. So
the third question, how will breaks and lunch periods be incorporated, considering that kids have a tendency to congregate and play together, especially in the elementary schools? So the high schools and the middle schools in a typical year have one lunch period. However, because of this new normal, most of our, or actually all of our secondary schools will be having 2 to 3 lunch periods. In the elementary level, they have the primary and the intermediate lunch periods to address the number of students in the cafeteria. And so all schools have determined the maximum capacity in the cafeteria. I know Joe is showing some pictures. Some schools are using student desks instead of cafeteria desks so that the social distancing or physical distancing is easier to monitor. There are some schools who have plexiglass that's been put right in the middle of the cafeteria table so that students would be able to at least sit across from each other. However, all classrooms and cafeterias, libraries, and counselor's office, as well as the administrative offices, do have a maximum capacity. And so once they hit that capacity, they will get students to eat, cycle them out, and then bring students in to the next cycle of students in to eat. As far as congregation playing together, especially in the elementary school level, has a lot to do with teaching our students. We have something called positive behavior intervention supports. This is teaching our students appropriate and inappropriate behavior. And so I know Joe had showed a slide at one of our elementary schools where instead of hugging or shaking hands, you do a air high five or just a wave instead of physical contact with each other. So absolutely at the elementary level, it's going to take a lot of communication with our students and our parents to ensure that our students are safe. And it's really just teaching and continuously reinforcing our students to have to follow the proper protocols, washing hands before eating, not touching your eyes or your nose or your mouth, wearing your mask at all times. And so, like, for example, this picture here is UPI Elementary School. Instead of using the cafeteria desk, they use the excess student desk that they have in the schools. And so this is the 6 feet distancing that you're going to see. And so it's just a matter of communication and just teaching our students the new normal from what we've had from previous years.
And again, if we're only talking about 100 students at an elementary school or less, that'll make it easier, I believe, to try to manage that situation, at least in the opening phase, until we get more students back. So a lot of reinforcement of hygiene and a lot of supervision.
The next question, media reports indicate that GDOE is still waiting for their PPE and cleaning supplies. Has it been confirmed that these will arrive before the 17th targeted opening?
Well, yes. So as I mentioned earlier, we're still in the process of trying to secure those supplies, and in the event that those supplies are not in time for us to stage and distribute them to the schools, we will have to take another look at the start date. So we are again, we have several procurement processes underway, and we hopefully within the next week or two we'll be able to confirm which option will help us get through at least the first 30 days of school.
Thank you, sir. The next question, it says, hi, John and Joe. For the 2 online learning models and also for the off days and the traditional model, is the idea that students will be engaged between the hours of 8 a.m. and 3 p.m., or is that completely flexible? If flexible, would there be a consistent time that students will need to be engaged online? This is for planning purposes with employers and work schedules.
Yes, it's going to have to be substantially flexible. The synchronous model, meaning when everybody is online at the same time, is very, very, very difficult to manage when you have multiple classes and you have multiple students who are taking those similar classes. One of the challenges that we're obviously having, not just on Guam but throughout the country, is that we're trying to implement models that have never been done on such a large scale. Online learning has been around for years. There have been universities that have been online for years, and even K-12 institutions that have been online for years. But to do this from an entirely district standpoint is something that has never really been done, or at least I have not heard in any meeting that anyone has come out with any type of a scholarly paper that says, hey, our entire district went 100% online for such a long period, and this is how we kind of did it. So the synchronous model of being online at every single period, just like you would a regular day, is just not possible. And we don't believe that would be successful. So what it's going to require is we would need to have some type of routine in the home. And that's where the teachers will work with the families to set up that schedule at home, where there's somewhat of a routine. There, as I mentioned earlier, there is going to be some synchronous video conferencing that we think is going to be very important to provide guidance to students and supports. That will be scheduled by the teacher and coordinated within the school. So the school, all the schools know that all of their online teachers and all of the different schedules will have to be coordinated within school so that there's not too much overlap. So that students don't have conflicting times. But when those schedules are set up, those will be shared with the families so that the families know what time of the week will their child need to log on to actually participate in those online sessions. And as I noted, it's a minimum of 1 time per week per course, with a maximum of 3 times per week per course. But again, that schedule will be set up at the school site with the teacher. They're going to work very hard to make sure that their schedules are coordinated internally, and then those will be shared with the students so that they know when they have to attend those video conferences. Now, there will be other times, like I know that there's a question about tutoring. There is, we don't call them necessarily tutoring, but like interventions and supports. So there will be support opportunities where the students can interact with the teacher, and the teacher is able to provide supports to either small groups of students or to their parents directly, where they can provide that guidance. Those will also be scheduled, and sometimes in many cases, those will also have to be scheduled kind of like at the request of the parent. So there will be opportunities to get additional guidance, additional supports, or if necessary, some type of tutoring support if needed. Now, and let me just go ahead and answer the other curriculum question here regarding whether or not the same teachers will be teaching all 3 models. There are some schools that have brought that up, that they would have all 3 teachers kind of teaching all 3. That would be hard to do because, when you're teaching online, you're kind of really trying to navigate and get better at teaching online, and you're trying to manage, groups of students, almost independently. I mean, we have some experience with this already, not just teachers who have taught online, but we have teachers who teach what are called course by conferences, which is basically the hard copy model, where students are not physically in class and teachers provide supports to those students. And what we are finding is that these teachers are spending a substantial amount of time with students independently. So they're on their phone constantly, they're on their phone with the parents and students. So it's not, if you have a classroom of, let's say, 15 students face-to-face, you can actually give instruction to all 15 at one time and answer quick questions here and there. But when you're doing kind of the home learning model, sometimes you're kind of giving instruction individually to 15 separate individuals, and then you're providing supports to 15 separate individuals. So those that would make it very difficult for a teacher to be able to teach all three. You know, we don't necessarily think that that would be the best way, but ultimately that would be a school decision, and we have the principals kind of collecting their data. Mr. Fernandez noted that we actually have the hard data on the models of learning, and we're seeing a substantial number of individuals who are choosing the home learning models. And what we believe, at least from Central, is that if you have 50 to 60% of your families choosing the home learning model, then that justifies allocating particular staff to address those students. It's almost like a whole separate school. So yeah, that's something that we're working with the administrators on to make sure that those strategies are taken into consideration.
And, let me go ahead and address one thing just right off the bat and very directly. Like I said, and we're an employer as well. So what we say is something that we're trying to bring to your attention are things that are on our radar as well. We're going to have employees who are going to need to work, who also have children, and who will also be impacted, whether they are 100% at home or going to school, on the alternating schedule. And so again, it forces the organization to look at options like telework, to be flexible when it comes to looking at the needs of our employees relative to childcare. Looking at teachers who are asking whether they can just do online versus be physically at school. I mean, there's a lot of accommodations, a lot of flexibility, a lot of new ideas that we have to consider for ourselves as the implementer. And I know that you're going to be in the same situation where once the schedules are go to the parents and the kids, you may be approached by your employees to again be able to consider their situation and their circumstances. And again, we're here to acknowledge that and to let you know that we're going through those same exercises as well, and to also seek your flexibility and seek your whatever you can do to help us to address those challenges. Again, this is not the permanent situation that we hope for or are planning for. We're looking at this as part of a phased recovery. And for us, this is kind of our phase one. And we know that the economy is not fully reopened yet. So we're hoping that that presents us an opportunity to work together collaboratively to figure out how to move through this phase. But it definitely will be a challenge, and it's going to be disruptive to some who are not used to, this type of situation. I think on the good side, it really is helping us to build a lot of capacity, not just as a school system, in terms of ramping up technology and professional development to be able to accommodate these models of learning, but it is ramping us up in terms of looking at productivity and how we address our employee needs. So, we're looking at that as a long-term benefit, but in the near term, we just want to acknowledge it is going to be challenging and disruptive in some cases, but this is where we're at. I think what we say to some of our stakeholders is that, it would be easier for us to say, we're just going to stay closed until we can get all our students back. But this approach is really looking at how we can continue with our mission of teaching and learning in this, in these particular circumstances. So it really is our best shot, I guess our best set of ideas with regard to how we can proceed, this school year. But we definitely look forward to any suggestions and any concerns that you have as well. Go ahead,
There's
Erika.
one question, sir. Half a day will the students have their temperature checked prior to boarding their bus? We're currently working with DPW. The physicians group has provided recommendations relative to school busing. When we spoke with DPW, they are not anticipating. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, at this point, they're not planning to do the temperature checks, and again, part of it is just due to the need to safely operate the buses. As they stop in the middle of the street, they're trying to get students on board, or letting them off as efficiently as possible. And I think adding the temperature check is as DPW is indicating some concerns with the amount of time that the bus and the traffic will be stopped for that reason. And of course, prior to the buses arriving, kids are going to be at the bus stop. Maybe there will be an adult there. In some cases, there isn't an adult there. So our strategy is really to be working with parents to try to reinforce the screening at home. If your kids have symptoms that might be related to being sick, or or more specifically COVID-19 symptoms, we're going to want them to stay home and not come at all to schools. But if they do come and they do get on a bus, again with the facial coverings and with the physical distancing and disinfection of the school buses in place, when they do arrive at school, the plan is to temperature check them as they get off the bus and move to to a hand washing station to wash their hands and do all of that before they enter the classroom. So at least when they get to the school, those measures will be in place.
Thank you, sir. The next question, how has DOE been working with vendors, i.e. cleaning companies, and has it been paying vendors? Or if it is behind, by how much or how long?
So that's again, generally speaking, when we're talking about vendor payments, I think it's no secret that when it's come down to especially our local funds, given the past reductions in our budget, in our GDOE budget, and the government's resources due to the federal tax cuts and other recent measures, when we're shorted funds due to lower collections or other budget cuts, then it becomes difficult to always timely pay vendors, and that's something we've been working with the administration to address. And I think this year we've done better than expected, just with regard to the local funds being provided to the department on a timely basis. However, that's an ongoing challenge. The benefit right now is that with regard to the COVID-19 supplies and supports that we need, we've got about, I guess, $41.5 million was provided by the federal government. And so when it comes to federal dollars, those dollars are there, those dollars are available, and it's a much easier process once we get approved activities and once those services are rendered. When it comes to the federal dollars, that comes in handy because we're able to guarantee and assure that those dollars get expended according to the approved activities. So I guess that's how I can answer that. So when it comes to the PPEs and everything that we're trying to get with the CARES fund, the Education Stabilization Funds, because those are federal dollars, we can count for those being available so long as they are allowed within the grant.
Will it be the same facilitating all three learning models? Is there a concern or burnout? And I think, Joe, you answered that question, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Those are the only questions. That's the last of the questions.
Yeah, if I can maybe just close out at least the section regarding the curriculum piece, is we are acknowledging two things with a lot of our teachers and administrators. And although we know this is going to be definitely a stressful time for a lot of folks, not just the teachers and the administrators, but obviously the students and their families. But based on the training that we're having right now and the discussions that we're having regarding our curriculum and the work, we see a huge potential in what's happening. First, we see a huge acknowledgement that there's going to need to be a substantial amount of parent and student engagement with their work. A lot of this work, especially if they've selected the home learning model, a lot of that is still independent time. Even if we had the maximum of 21 or 24 video conferences throughout the week, in order for the students to be successful, to actually get their work done, to actually, practice the material, it's going to require a lot of their individual engagement as well as the parental engagement. And I think this is a really good chance for us to help kind of build the capacity of our community and our families to actually help their kids in learning the material. I mean, one positive conversation I had with a parent a couple of weeks ago was, wow, this is the first time I knew what the standards were. I said, oh, really? What do you mean? Because I didn't know that, kindergarten and first grade, this was the standards for math. And now I know what to do when I go home. And I said, oh, that's great. That's like a huge plus, is we're making it very explicit to the families about what students are supposed to be learning, and they can find creative ways to help their kids, to reinforce what's being taught in the schools. The second one is the huge push towards the use of technology, even with the families who are choosing the home learning hard copy model. Because just because they're using the hard copy model, a lot of those families have acknowledged that they have some internet access. And because they have some internet access, whether it be through a cell phone or through an old computer or something, the reason why they chose the hard copy version is because they're just fearful that they won't be able to engage in all the online material, which is totally fine. We can support that, but we can still support those families in their continued effort to access technology. So if online work or online interaction with the community or the government or the school system is not a regular part of their practice, we can help them in the development of that skill. Also, this is being done from kinder all the way through graduation from high school. So we really do see a huge boost both internally to the traditional model, the hard copy, and obviously the online folks in the consistent and systematic use of technology. And this is going to build our collective capacity in the community as a whole. It's building our teacher capacity, it's building our student capacity and their parents. So if you look at the desire to get our government to utilize technology more, and everything that had to be done through the Department of Labor for the applications, we knew that technology was a challenge for a lot of families. Over time, this is going to help build the collective capacity of our entire community with regards to utilizing online tools and being able to maximize the resources that are available through the internet and all of the different applications that govern that. So thank you for the opportunity to share with you our plans.
So if we could just, Joe, maybe we can address that technology. I mean, you mentioned it, but I think the other question we normally get is, we've been saying that, on day one, we're not going to have a laptop or a tablet for every student who needs one, nor are we going to be able to guarantee internet access for every household. And that's why that option of hard copy materials and support from the schools is important to be very clear about. And of course, it's a tough, we're in a tough situation anyway to ensure that we provide the necessary support, but that's where we are today. What we are hoping for is that with the federal funds, we are able to invest in more equipment for technology equipment for our schools and our students, and we are working to shore up our connectivity at the school campuses, as well as working with the governor's office on potential solutions or ideas for addressing connectivity at the village level. So Joe, I don't know if you want to add anything more about the equipment and the connectivity at the schools, but I do know that we have a request for information that did go out to our internet service providers. I think it was due on the 15th, and there will probably be some follow-up meetings happening with those providers, looking at some of those village level solutions, not just for GDOE, but also for students who attend UOG and GCC. So more information will come out of that, that process on the village side. But Joe, anything further on the school side, since you're closer to the details?
Yeah, I think one of the things we want to kind of share is that our approach to supporting families through technology is very systematic. I mean, we have it laid out over the course of an entire year and multiple years. One thing that we did know we didn't want to do, and I know that sometimes people kind of jump to say, okay, just purchase computers and then just pass it out to everybody so that everyone has a computer. That would be the absolute worst plan that we could possibly think of. And we know districts that have done that. And we every year we go to the U.S. Department of Education. We talk about our consolidated grant. We have a lot of these plans, so we were able to collaborate and share with other districts about certain types of strategies that have been deployed, not just throughout the country, but even throughout the territory. And one thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to buy 10,000 computers and all of a sudden pass those out, to 10,000 different people. You really have to build the capacity of the community, and you have to build the capacity of the students and their families so that they are able to utilize the technology correctly, keep the technology safe, and there's some continuous protocol so that they understand that that technology is eventually going to have to come back to the system. We know that there are a number of districts that have tried that, where they pass out as much as 10 to 15,000 computers, and then what happens is the following year you get 7,000 back. That would not be a responsible use of our federal funding, even if we had the funds. So we want to be very systematic in how we are introducing technology into the homes of a lot of our families. That first phase is making sure that internally within the school system, our technology is really up to par. So we are making sure that all of our libraries, all of our computer labs, and we're making sure that all of our schools have at least one computer lab. The largest schools, we want to have multiple computer labs, as well as making sure that every classroom has a certain number of computers that can be accessed by the teachers and the students. Now, with the diminished capacity amount, one of the things that we're excited about, with the smaller amount of students that are physically on campus, there's a chance that every student who attends traditionally can have a computer in every classroom already. So basically, a lot of the work can already be done through computers while they're on campus in the traditional model. And when we do get to the point where we can increase the capacity, where more students are going to come on campus, we believe that we can actually still hit that with our new set of orders. We're purchasing close to 15,000 computers with our federal funding this year, and that's in addition to our current 15,000. We have about 15 to 18,000 currently in our inventory. So we're looking at very close to a one-to-one scenario, where there's at least one device to every student that we have on campus. So that's one thing, is making sure that internally we are really stocked up with technology, and our teachers have the capacity to utilize those tools for their instruction. The second piece is opening what we are calling community learning centers. This has been an idea that was floating around for a number of years, but for whatever reason, there was pushback, and people didn't want to try it. But now that there's a greater awareness and there's a greater push for families to access the internet, we intend to open between 18 to 20 schools in the evening. We're looking at from 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock, and then on the weekends, possibly from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock, where their parents and families can actually come to their village school and utilize either the internet signal, and they can log on with their own devices. If they have challenges with the internet access, they can use their own devices, or they can actually use the equipment that's there on campus. And when I say their village school, we mean that it doesn't have to be their child's school. It's whatever. If their school in the village is open as a community learning center, any school, any public school student there, any public school student and charter school student that's in the village can actually go to that school, log in with their identification, and utilize the equipment. And I believe we're working to make sure that it's also open to private school students if necessary as well. So we want to make this available to all students. I mean, we see this happening now. McDonald's, the mall, some of these other places have free internet access, and what do you do when you sometimes see students kind of outside? I was in Manila at a store across the street from GW, and there's like a bunch of students that are just congregating outside next to the water filling station, just looking at what they were doing, and one of them said, "Oh, the owner lets us access the internet here as long as we keep the place clean," and stuff like that. So we know that there's an interest to actually find free Wi-Fi in the community. And that's something that we can actually provide to students, kind of on a consistent basis.
So I think, what you're hearing is that, this has presented a lot of challenges, but also opportunities to tackle some of the issues that we probably haven't had a chance to tackle before in the normal course of a school year. But again, DOE can't really do it alone. We're not the experts. We want to work with our parents, our families, and our business community to take the opportunity to be innovative and creative around issues like childcare, around the issues of employee work schedules. Now that we're in a more modern age of technology, we haven't really revisited a lot of our practices in the arena of tutoring, and people have asked us about tutoring and around technology, around the connectivity at the villages or at the workplace or in other places. It really, despite the terrible pandemic situation that we're in, I think deep inside for some of us, it really presents an opportunity, and we feel kind of excited about that down the road there will be a silver lining to all of this in expanding our capacity to innovate, to modernize, and to really think through the needs of our community, and especially our parents and our students. I'm really worried and concerned about equity issues around the most vulnerable households who are probably going to have the hardest time adjusting to the situation. And I just want you to know that it's not lost on us. I mean, it is something we're going to be watching and we're going to be concerned about as we move forward. But part of this is going to really just take implementation. Let's start it. Let's see where we're at. And then we're going to need to be adaptable and flexible in trying to improve the situation. So with that, in the spirit of that, discussion and collaboration, we do appreciate any suggestions, ideas, and partnerships that you think would also be helpful. And again, we think the opening of schools is critical to the reopening of the economy and the reopening of the community in general. So we know that our success is going to be dependent on you and vice versa. So however we can work together and however we can share ideas, we would appreciate it. So thank you for the opportunity to share our plans with all of you.
Thank you so much. We totally agree with you. I think that, you have done a fantastic and incredible job of putting this great program together. Like you said, we just need to get started and we'll work through it all, right? And I think that you have the support of the chamber and whatever we can do to get information out, any type of partnership that we can work on as far as, opportunities to help our students. We're happy to work those out with you. So we appreciate your time. We appreciate your sharing this information. And we look forward to another opportunity to work with you. And we thank you. So if there's no other, I don't see any more questions on the chat. We've taken up a certain amount of your time. It's about an hour and a half. So thank you again. And I just wanted to mention to our members that have stayed on, we do have I kind of teased it a little bit at the beginning. We have a hybrid event on August 19th, and that is going to be our congressional forum. We've invited the 3 candidates to hang out with us and answer some questions from the business community. So we look forward to seeing you at that next hybrid event. So thank you again so much, John, Joe, and Erika. We truly appreciate you. It's great to see you, and hopefully we'll see you in person with lunch next time.
It's nice seeing you, Kat.
Nice seeing you. Thanks a lot for hosting us.
Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much. You too. Bye.
Bye. How do we log off? I don't see a.
I don't know.
They all left me.